Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching or listening to this. And welcome to this week's episode of the Non-Identity Podcast. Now, this week we're joined by author Bill. Hi, Bill. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Not too bad. Thank you for joining us. Before we get into your story and stuff, can you just explain to people who you are and where you grew up?
Yeah, for sure. My name's Bill Wittur, and I go by the pen name of William Wittur, my driver's license, or what my mother calls me when I'm in trouble. And the story can be either really short, really long. Basically, I grew up in Ottawa, but I've been a bit of a nomad over the last 30 odd years. I moved from Ottawa in Canada to Vancouver, and then found myself in Toronto where I met my lovely wife. And we then moved to London, Ontario. And then just before the pandemic, we moved to Kingston, Ontario, a nice little enclave in Southeast Ontario, where we set up our base. And it's been quite lovely since.
Like we said in the intro, you're an author, so do you want to share with people what you wrote and what the process was leading into that?
It was kind of an unusual series of calamities, if you will. As you can gauge, I did these. We did these number of moves, and part of it was really trying to find a better location for us to really establish our family, really establish our home, and the great opportunity that went with my wife and her career. And I was more than happy to follow and help set up shop for ourselves, my son and my wife, and get ourselves planted firmly. And in that process, I had basically been pushed to shut down a business that I had started. It was a wine importing and distribution business. So you would ask how a writer finds himself in that kind of situation. But writing had always been one of those things that you love to do, but you're always told to really not engage with because it's not really a real career. It's not really it tends to be kind of downplayed as far as like, well, what's your real job going to be and what's your real profession going to be? So I had always been kind of living that lie, and in a very weird way, the pandemic helped me expose that lie and confront it, and of course start to run with it. And when the pandemic hit, of course, everybody had to do their various efforts to lock down and take care of themselves and their families, and I did the same. And as we emerged, I wanted to return to school. I wanted to do a master's level program. I've got a post-secondary education in economics of all things, but a minor was in English. So I had always been trying to push the needle in that right direction. And ultimately, I found myself one day. I volunteer at a local group. It's called Joe's Mill. It's a music instrument lending library, and it's rather unique. But one of the volunteers came in one day. He was rather excited, and he said, "Hey, I got into this program." I'm like, well, tell me what it was all about. And I was very receptive to new opportunities because I had been knocking on the doors of a number of institutions looking for postgraduate work, master's level stuff. And the institutions really hadn't changed despite having to change during the pandemic. They none of them offered viable online programs that I was really satisfied with or that were economical. And so quite literally, this program was available in my backyard. It was more of a music program. It's called Music and Digital Media. And the program focuses on really quite exactly that. It focuses on music, music performance, music theory, and music history, and as well as the digital media component of music, which is recording and video production. Through all of that, there was a reinvigoration of my desire to create. I had already been writing quite a bit before that, but everything seemed to come together all at once. And in that program, I discovered artificial intelligence and how it can really blossom into different ways to massage or enhance your output, your creative output. So it was through that program that I rekindled my real true love, which is writing. And I already had a couple of book ideas in place, and I shaped the story that I wrote, Extinction Event, around the idea of this guy going back to school and discovering a glitch in some digital versus analog recordings. And he then investigates that, and he uncovers this whole story evolving, that everybody and he and his friends catch up to, and discover that there's a much bigger nefarious plot afoot. And he finds himself kind of stumbling into this mystery, and finds somebody from his past who is trying to quite literally change the world.
Going back to your volunteering, so I work in schools. I've worked in schools for the last 20 years, but I actually started off volunteering with young people when I was 14. And obviously you volunteer, but being a volunteer is frowned upon quite a lot in modern society. Why do you feel that is, and what do you feel the importance of volunteering is?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. You know, well, I was well suited in a number of different ways to put myself forward as a volunteer without the hubris. I was able to, I mean, you know, we have a family circumstance where my partner, my wife, is the primary income earner, and I was able to put my foot forward and start by volunteering because I couldn't find either the education or the work. So I was doing during the pandemic. I was doing volunteering to deliver food to people who were less fortunate or unable to get out and do the shopping. And there were circumstances people either just didn't have the car or the transportation, or they had physical disabilities that they had to work with. So it was a real privilege to be able to bring food to a lot of people's front door. That was one thing, and I really got a lot from it in terms of understanding my place in life and my privilege, and understanding that it doesn't have to be an enormous, you know, daily or weekly quota. Google, for example, or Alphabet as it's known now, um, as a company, they really strongly encourage all of their employees to commit 20% of their time to nonprofit or volunteering or charitable organizations. And a lot of high schools do that as well. So it's not that I'm disagreeing or anything like that, but I'm trying to elaborate on ways that volunteering really is such a vital component of our lives, in a very broad perspective. We do find, yes, I think there is always that motif that you have to chase the dollar. And every charitable organization has to do that as well. They have to build a brand, they have to build an identity and a real sense of purpose. And they have to light a fire that people will want to sit around and engage with. And to jump to Joe's Mill, I am I describe myself as a writer, but I love music. Music is such an intricate part of my life. You know, I'm constantly, you know, if you try and think of yourself without music, it's so hard for me to fathom, right? Even every human has a heartbeat, a rhythm. We can sometimes hear things, and sometimes, unfortunately, if you've got tinnitus, it might not be the most pleasant thing. But you step outside, you hear the birds in the morning, you hear the wildlife, and then of course you hear the rhythm and pace of humanity as we all come, we wake up and we hear these noises, etc. Um, so being part of Joe's Mill again was quite a privilege, and it was in most cases, honestly, it was just kind of sitting there, greeting customers, saying hi, checking the instruments, that kind of stuff. But those music instruments brought so much joy to the lives of people who either wanted to test out new instruments or try new things, or just simply discover, music for the first time. And again, kind of shedding that sense of hubris and saying, okay, I'm going to try playing, guitar or bass or drums. Or hey, we've got a sitar here, or we've got tabla drums. Like just try those out. It's got a massive library, and it was really cool to see people's eyes light up when they rediscover kind of this sense of creative awareness. And we are humans. What really identifies ourselves is that real lust for creativity and the arts. And during the pandemic, it was the arts, it was the entertainment, it was podcasts, it was having discussions, but it was that creative spark that kept keeping people coming to the table. And so volunteerism really helps support a lot of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. The reason why I said that it's probably a bit frowned upon is because in my line of work, when I speak to young people about volunteering time, and then like you said, it's like, well, what am I getting out of it? What money am I going to make? And like you said, it's not about chasing the dollar, because the sense of fulfillment you can get out of volunteering is so much more. And like I said, for me, it set up my career. If I didn't do that volunteering when I was 14, I wouldn't have worked in the education system for the last 20 years. So I see you great opportunities without having to, like you said, chase that dollar.
You raise a really important point, is that when when you're a young person, you're coming out of school, you've got to pay rent, you've got a lot of expenses, you've got a lot of bills. Our it's such a massive discussion, and that's why I acknowledge that it's such a. I'm trying to BS my way through that answer, but the reality is that our entire system seems to work against that. And
Yeah,
I definitely acknowledge your concern, because you take somebody like I've got a son who's 20. He's chasing the dollar. He's got to pay his rent. Rents are expensive. He's got to pay his food. He's got to eat. He's got to entertain himself. He's got to go to the gym, all of those things. He likes to have a car. uh, those are so expensive, right? And our society at large doesn't provide enough umbrella for that, to support the desire to help others, versus we got to kind of put food on the table first. If I had the answer to that, I'm sure we'd be talking about so many other things. I would love to have the answer to that question. That's why I say it's such a powerful question.
no, exactly. And going back to musical instruments, what's the weirdest instrument that you've been able to play or you've seen?
Oh, I honestly, my expression about myself, again, stripping down my hubris, is that I'm really good at being mediocre at everything.
Same here.
Which basically kind of acknowledges that I love the idea of being able to approach something, but like I would never be like a performer of something. Now I have a friend of mine. He purchased an instrument called the harpeggi. Harp, and think of arpeggio as a combined word. And the harpeggi is a large plank of wood with strings and buttons, and you play it. And it's a beautiful sounding instrument, and it kind of sounds harpsichordish like, but guitar. It's a kind of a combination of guitar and piano. And I love watching people who are super talented figure these things out and excel with them. And I'm like, okay, that's just giving me my jolt of inspiration for the day, because maybe one day I'll be able to sit down and play a couple of chords as well. But I'm more happy every day to discover just one more thing with playing guitar. That's my go-to instrument. And you know, the beauty of the guitar is you can take it anywhere, you can pick it up anywhere. Every country, every world you visit, etc., has some version of a guitar and some tuning that's similar to a guitar. And I just find that that's my comfort food of instruments. I can sit down and I can play really basic 3 chord songs, or I can try and push myself to do a solo or something else. But ultimately, it is such a muse as far as opening up a world of entertainment for myself. And then, of course, if you have a campfire and you have friends over for a couple of drinks or something, and then you can play a couple of songs. You know, for me, sometimes life doesn't get much better.
No, 100%. And why do you think music resonates so well with people? Because obviously it can change our moods. So we could be in a bad mood and listen to something that put us in a better mood. They use a lot of music in films and TV shows to add to the scene. So why do you think music itself sort of interacts with our feelings and our moods?
Uh, you know, again, a really great question. I think the core of it is that we are all we're basically all walking, talking, tuned instruments.
Yeah.
Some of us just don't know that, and some of us are on that path to discovering it. I've discovered it, but I'm still in the process of tuning my own instrument. You know, um, and I think music resonates with so many people because I'll go to one of my favorites, like Paul McCartney. He can pack a incredibly profound story
Yep.
into a 2 minute and 30-second piece that just leaves you thinking about it for days and weeks and years on end afterwards, and thinking like, how did he do that? You know, like a song like Eleanor Rigby or something, or Here, There, and Everywhere, which are just, you know, such exceptional songs. But that's, you know, all you had to commit was 2.5 minutes of your life, and you're forever changed. There's so few instances of other media, other entertainment, other discussions where you can have that kind of an impact so quickly. You know, this is where the bridge is to storytelling with me, and this is why I love the connection of music and writing, because the greatest challenge for me as a writer is to try to achieve that 2 3 minute a moment of spark of inspiration that leaves someone walking away saying, you know, God damn, that just changed my life. That just totally just like rocked my world. I'm in tears, or I'm laughing, or I'm you know, upset or whatever. But every time there's a change in a lot of our societal infrastructure, it tends to be led by some kind of change that's happening in the music front.
And going to your writing, how do you sort of, because like you've just said, like you can listen to a song for 2 minutes, it could change your life. When you're writing, your words have got to connect with so many different people. It could be like 1,000, it could be 2,000 people, where like one-on-one conversation now, we can bounce off each other and tell each other's moods and stuff. You can't do that with a page of words. So how do you implement that into your writing, that it will connect with me, or it will connect with someone who's 50 years old, or it could connect with a 15-year-old? How do you try and do that in your writing?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's you know, every writer's desire is to answer that question for sure. How do I try to do that? I try to 2 ways. I'm again, I've done tried to work hard to drop my hubris and acknowledge that um, as important as my story is, it's important to try and think of like different scenarios that other people are in and try to approach that without being me, without, you can see me, you can see that I'm just your middle-aged white guy. It's very challenging, and that's part of the challenge, is to try and write it with a level of empathy, but at the same time write it in a level of appeal that's going to really kind of connect with somebody. The flip side is that is be yourself. Like I've spent 55 years trying to just try and find a way to be myself. And I feel like I'm finally just coming into that. And the more transparent that I am, people grab onto that pretty quickly. They grab onto the sense of transparency. And if there's an honesty, then they may or may not connect with that. Like, the Beatles weren't for everybody. That's why the Rolling Stones were around.
Exactly.
So the Stones told a different story, and so everybody works to try and be themselves while also trying to fill a gap. The third piece of that, for example, when I wrote a collection of lyrics that I called Bliss, after one of my other heroes, which is Joseph Campbell, who he was one of the first to really use a combination of mythology and psychology to describe what he calls the monomyth, which is the arc of the hero or heroine as they go through life and discover who they are. And the hero's journey has been used quite ubiquitous in a number of different media formats over the last several decades. Joseph Campbell, if you're not familiar with him, he was basically the consulting guru to George Lucas in writing the arc of Star Wars stories and creating that hero's journey. So the point here is that third point of reference is to try to find something external that somebody else who's obviously much smarter than me has consolidated and put into a digestible package that you can then interpret and massage and add your own tone to it.
Moving into your book, you talk a lot about technology and stuff, and obviously AI and things. What benefits can you see to AI? Because as a teacher, we have to do a lot of training sessions on how to look at that students have used AI to complete their homework and stuff. So we're kind of looking at AI as a negative way, but obviously there is positives. What positives do you see from AI?
Well, I'll start by saying, again, great question, because I used AI quite a bit in the last 20 months as I got more and more exposed to it. Again, repeating that phrase that I describe myself is I'm mediocre at everything. So I used AI as a tool to enhance my output, whether it was image to text to image creation, or text or sample to music composition, or video creation, or even writing support. But ultimately, AI is a tool. I'm old enough to know that example of when you had the little pocket calculator, the Casio or the Scientific American, calculator, and that was forbidden in the schoolroom. And you had these moments where the teacher was like going through this conundrum of like, well, do I ban Bill from using this equation from creating the exponential calculus x over y of this, or do I just let him try and understand the principle of it and then possibly apply that principle at a later date? So I think AI isn't too far away from that. It's a tool. We're all at that growing pain stage. I don't I don't envy the task of a teacher trying to understand, is the student engaged or are they cheating? If a student, let me tell you this, if a student gives a response to and it's a at least considerate of what the question is, I call that a win
Yeah.
because that means the student has at least tried to be engaged with the process. If the student just totally checks out and says, "Yeah, yeah, I'm out," Lee, I don't care. I don't care about the subject. I don't, and I'm not going to be at class. I'm not going to attend. That's a fail in and of itself, and that's where, we get back to that whole sense of volunteerism, because somebody needs to put a net under that student and understand why that student has checked out. Because again, humans are a curious species. We continue to do our thing. Our jam is really understanding our connection with creativity and how our brains produce and create new ideas, new projects. And when a student has checked out, there's obviously something more going on than just using a tool for doing an essay or creating a PowerPoint presentation. I think as long as they're there, then you have the opportunity to engage them and bring them into the into the process of being a good human.
No, I get, and also the way I think the fact that they've had to sit there and type commands in based around the subject you're giving them, like you said, means they were present for a bit because they have to know what to type in.
Yeah.
So it means something's gone into their mind. It may not be what you wanted, but at least they've had to use some of the knowledge from the lesson to get the commands right into the system. I think with AI, because I use AI for my titles of my podcast because I feel like it gives a better title. So I think it comes down to, like you said, it's a tool. So you put a tool in someone's hands. If it's a good person, then they use it for good. If it's a bad person, they use it for bad. The only problem I have a bit with AI is how people are now using it across the internet to come up with fake news and stuff like that. What's your opinions on stuff like that?
Well, it's actually a great segue. I'm going to self promote a little bit. That was very apparent to myself. Like I'm at a crossroads with different levels of experience with digital marketing, traditional marketing, AI tools, writing, music, etc. And part of Extinction Event was really to explore the idea of fake news and planting stuff in social media and other platforms to um, not just shape a story, but create it and keep running with it and keep influencing people in a very manipulative way. So yeah, I mean, I have a love affair with AI, but of course, it's a yin yang type thing. With every love, there's a hate. And we are really at a crossroads of not being able to contain that beast. It is a myth that is as old as time. And I do refer to this, like the mythology becomes part of this book where, Prometheus brought fire from the mountain and, stole fire from Zeus and was punished for it. But humans were given fire, which fire was eventually used to create our identity on this planet. And it's one of those things where you can go from Prometheus to the story of the Jungle Book to other stories where fire tends to be kind of that real catalyst that differentiates ourselves. And AI is ultimately no different. And we are always at danger of doing greater damage than good with a number of these different tools. And we do see it in the deep fake is the most troubling. We also see it with things like fraud. And I may have also already seen it with myself in a personal circumstance where, you have somebody imitating your identity, either in the form of like just online tracking or cookie tracking, that kind of stuff. But it also has just permeated so deeply with our pop culture so quickly. My wife and I went to see the movie Fall Guy with Ryan Gosling just yesterday, and deepfake plays an important part of that storytelling, and it becomes ultimately I'm kind of BSing my way around it because I don't have an answer for how do you address this beast that's been unleashed. Um, and we just have to try to be smarter and more attentive humans in the process. And that unfortunately makes us more cynical. It makes us more, even more disconnected than we already are. So the kudos really go out to folks like you who engage in one-on-one discussions that bring people into more communication. I think the more close we are and the more effort we make to connect, the more likely it is that we'll actually survive, as opposed to becoming distant and disconnected. That is really a kind of a recipe for disaster. So,
The way I look at it as well, I think we're at a stage with it. It's like getting a new toy. You just play with it all the time to see what it can do. But it does get to a point where you
yeah,
get bored of that new toy, and it just becomes
yeah,
part of life. I think we sort of saw it with the growth of gaming consoles. We saw it with the growth of mobile phones. We saw it with the growth of the internet. At first, we did everything we could with it, and now they just plateau to a point where it just becomes integrated into life. And I think we're sort of at that stage with AI, where we're just trying to see whatever we can use it for and try
yeah,
and quick route our task. But I think it will get to a point where we then realise actually it's more effort to try and get
yeah.
this AI to do it that we'll only start using it when it's needed. So I think it will level out. It might be another 20, 30, 40 years, but
Yeah,
I think
well,
we're just at that stage. It's still brand new in a way, isn't it? So,
that's right. That's right. It's a new shiny object, so let's
yeah,
go play with it, and then we get bored. You're exactly right. Um, just a knock on myself, of course, is that the AI, artificial intelligence. It's kind of cliche, but you can't really have artificial without art.
yeah,
And what we're seeing is that, and I see a lot of jokes or memes or comics about this, but there's a real underlying truth to it. Is that these tools can come out, and this is the knock on myself, is that these tools come out, and what we're replacing are graphic designers and composers and really super talented people that have spent their entire lives trying to do very specific tasks in the arts. And we haven't created that utopia world of like not, you know, punching the card to go into our factory or our other place, like we still have kind of that motif. And I think this goes back right to your first question, which is how do we create that sense or stimulate that sense of contribution to society as opposed to in our planet. Extinction Event, excuse me, is ultimately a love letter to planet Earth, this truly unique experience that we live on. That is the show me another one. I'd be happy to look at it. But like the reality is that people have been looking, and they had the rarity of planet Earth is so it's so profound. Sometimes you just don't want to even think about it, right? But um, so much of our process is to say art is such a vital part of our lives. And again, the pandemic is a perfect example of that. I'm waiting for that moment where AI replaces the that punch clock kind of lifestyle, and gives us this opportunity to expand our minds, expand our sense of belonging to the planet, and expand our level of importance as far as saving the planet. So far, I don't see a lot of that happening. There are some efforts to use AI to manage energy more efficiently, or to manage data as it relates to climate change and other issues, or looking at habitats, that kind of stuff. But again, that's just a tool to assimilate information and data into better packages that us humans can understand.
No, exactly. And going into social media, back to the arts, really. Do you think social media helps with the creativity of people, or do you think it can suppress it? Because obviously there's a lot of independent music makers or documentary makers that have now got platforms. Even this channel is my channel. I was only able to make this because of
Yeah.
YouTube or because of TikTok. But then do you think there's a lot of negativity that's put out on social media because people have got that speaking platform? So do you think it does more harm than good, or more good than harm?
Oh, again, a fabulous question, because like I mean, I'm going to be thinking about this long after our conversation, but
Me
I'll
too.
try and answer this intelligently. I really think, again, like social media kind of started to get its legs early in the 2000s,
Yeah,
but it in a weird way, it's really no different than sitting around the campfire from like a couple of nights ago to a couple of thousand years ago. We are social beasts. That's why it's called social media, and the there are pluses and minuses. I follow a couple of folks that like somebody like Ava Raskin, who is part of the Earth Species Project, which is aiming to communicate with animals. But at the same time, Ava Raskin developed the doom scroll, the endless scrolling, and so he and another few folks, they created this movie called The Social Dilemma, which is highly recommended, because it is a more informed answer to your question. The summary of which is, yes, it's a great tool. It introduces us, but again, it gets prone to abuse. I like to be an optimist. I come up from a digital media background. I think there's enormous potential in being able to connect people like you and I. A month ago, Lee, I didn't know who you were. I didn't
exactly.
have this opportunity to speak with you, and I really admire this opportunity to, for you having reached out, and for me having this opportunity and privilege to speak with you. That didn't exist a few years ago. I wasn't able to self-publish my book easily, but I was able to use social media to verify editors and proofreaders for my book, so that it's not just me spewing a bunch of stuff. It's me, filtered and then professionally published on a platform that I can get distribution and promotion. That didn't exist in different ways, even as close as 5 to 10, 15 years ago. Up until the millennium, there were so many gatekeepers, really kind of acting like a dam, as a sense, and preventing a lot of conversation from happening. I'll go back to an analogy that you used. I mean, social media is still a shiny object from 15, 10, 20 years ago that we're still kind of trying to get a grasp on. And now, to layer in this element of AI, yeah, we've got a lot to grapple with. But the reality is that we have these tools to enhance our lives, create nice conversations, and hopefully inform other people about our journey along the way.
No, exactly. I feel the same. It's brand new, but it's also it's hard to weigh up, because I look at it and, like you said, we wouldn't be able to meet, people wouldn't be able to self-publish, I wouldn't be able to broadcast. But then on the other side of things, we consume so much content that I feel it can be lowered. Not our intelligence is the wrong word to use. Our concentration span is getting shorter and shorter, because you've got that option just to flick or to skip or to watch
Yeah.
something else, which then makes us as a I'm noticing with the young people I'm working with now compared to 15 years ago, it makes like the 50-minute lesson span is too long now because they're so used to the concentration spans going lower that it needs to be sharp and quick. And like you said, it needs to be
Yeah.
grabby, which is again goes back to it could be a good thing because it means the teachers need to be more creative with the time that they get given to deliver that session. But then
Yeah.
also sometimes there's information that you need to spend a long period of time for that then the young person checks out. So it is still it's a hard one to
Oh, it's a very unique challenge. Like a lot of schools are starting to look at banning their phones from use at schools. Um, the counter, I would say, is that a lot of educators have to kind of accelerate their skills. Not an
exactly.
easy challenge, but they have to understand what their competition is. And rather than shut down the competition, they need to figure out a way to embrace that and make that part of their routine. I did see that somewhat over the last couple of years. I did see a lot of teachers, for good and bad, using tools like YouTube to support or supplement their educational program. You could get into a lengthy discussion about the pros and cons of that.
Because I
Whether
noticed with that, a lot of teachers will now just,
Yeah.
it's easy just to chuck on a 10-minute YouTube video. So it means
Yeah,
less
for sure.
time having to teach. It turns into lazy teaching sometimes. So,
Oh,
like you
for
said,
sure.
there is pros and cons with that as well. I can't be bothered
Yeah.
to now just put a YouTube video on and start.
Yeah. Well, Lee, again, I'm old enough that I can go back to the point where I had like the AV guy would come in with the trolley
Oh, the
and
TV on the
there'd
screen.
be your there'd be your VHS recorder and you'd have a projector and you'd be watching your sex ed or your other stuff on an old 1950s movie and all of a sudden, this is where things kind of become this weird simultaneous cultural event where stuff like Fallout or Voltec feels like modern day, and ultimately it goes back to the tools and how we're using them and what kind of freedom we're getting as a result of using those tools. So, sure, are we encouraging less than ideal educational standards? Of course we are. But how are we capturing that? Your guess is as good as mine because I wouldn't blame social media for that. That's a human thing. We're
Yeah.
prone to just use the tools at hand and become less effective, if you will, about how we go about that. So again, you can see how I'm quick to fall into that defend social media mode because I'm an optimist. I think the digital tools that we've seen over the last 25 years or so are incredibly profound in their ability to make us more productive and more unique and more more individual as humans and make our contributions in a more confident way. It's just the mess that kind of comes with it.
Do you think that everything going digital though is bringing down our practical creative side? Because if you look back in the Victorian times where there was no digital, we had the engineers like building bridges and engines and machines. Now, sort of everything's online. You get a 3D printer and you can build a machine in a couple of hours. So, do you think that's
Yeah.
taking away the practical skills and then it's expanding people's mind, or do you think again it'll weigh itself out?
Ooh. Uh, well, I think so much of it is going to have to, again, we lean into this opportunity, but yeah, like, are we seeing? We're still enjoying the infrastructure that
Yeah,
was built 150 years ago, but I would add to that, we're still enjoying the infrastructure that the Romans built 2,000 years ago
hundred
with
percent.
their
Yeah,
various aqueducts or their underground systems. It goes back to the old Monty Python sketch of like, oh, what did the Romans ever do for us? And and of course, every generation goes into a phase of hubris and acclimatizing themselves to what's going on, educating themselves, and then finding ways to establish a sense of legacy. I think every well-thinking human ultimately, ideally, maybe I should say, starts to think about what their legacy is. What are they going to leave behind? And is it going to be a big mired mess of confusing conversations on social media? Or is it going to be an aspirational moment where we say, I decided that this is going to be my way to make the planet better, or to make this moment better for other people in this move along, and we all just kind of move along in baby steps, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's the way to look at it. It goes with that expression of standing on the shoulders of giants, right? So we stand on the shoulders of giants. How are we going to see? We have to try very hard to fight back against this tsunami of stuff. And I fall victim to it too, because I love gaming. I love doing the doom scroll. I love checking up on what's going on, get my daily dopamine fix. But as the day starts, I say, well, how am I going to write? How am I going to contribute? How am I going to leave something that my son, my wife can be proud of, my other family members and friends can look at and say, well, at least he tried. And in the process, he actually became good. Like is what I'd like them to say at the end of that statement. So.
No, I totally agree, because, like you said, the statement of we're standing on the shoulder of giants, but one day we be the giants that others will be standing on our shoulders. So it's always to think back and look, what am I leaving behind for that next lot of generations? I think, that attitude to have every day is a really good thing. Well, Bill, we're coming to the end of our conversation, and it's been such a great conversation. If people want to get the book, where can they go?
Easiest place right now is Amazon. Just search for my name, William Wittur, and Extinction Event. You'll see the two books that I've got up there, Extinction Event and my collection of lyrics, Bliss. And I do have a couple of books in the process right now. One that I'm basically rewriting, that I wrote in 2008. That I didn't publish because the tools just didn't exist. And so now I'm excited about getting that out again.
You've done your own Star Wars, because he started at the end because he knew the technology wasn't right at the time. So you've done the same with your book.
And Star Wars Easter eggs.
Oh, brilliant. We'll put a link in the description below for people to get to your book. And as soon as your other books are released, we'll be more than happy for you to come back on and share what they're about. Before we go, though, I've got one last question. And this question I ask every guest. If you could be remembered for one word, and one word only, what would it be and why?
Ooh. As much as I say I'm a writer, I go back to that example of my ultimate hero, which is Paul McCartney, to write a 2.5-minute song that everybody would wind up whistling or humming on the subway or something, that would make them happy or put them in a happy place. That would be my mission in life.
So what would the word be that you'd like to be remembered by?
One word?
One word only, yeah.
Wow. I'm so bad at the one thing. I would say either creative, and let's just leave it at that.
Okay, brilliant. Don't worry, I haven't answered that question myself. I asked that, but I've never actually been able to find a word for myself yet either. So I know it's a tricky one.
Okay. Well, you had me on the spot, so that was the first thing that came to mind. So you have to trust that instinct.
Brilliant, 100%. Well, Bill, thank you again so much for your time. And anytime you want to come back on, we'd love to have you on.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you, Lee. It was great to meet you.